Anyway, welcome to Ardbeg, folks. I'll tell you a little bit about the place maybe before we go round today in the tour. There's a few tours going round, so we'll just sort of meander around, tell a little bit about the history of the place. Distillery itself has been here since 1815, so we've been here over 200 years. We're on the south coast of Islay, so we're on the Islay is the furthest south of all the islands on the west coast. We're about 28 miles from Ireland. Whisky making for us probably came across that narrow stretch of water over to Islay more than 200 years ago. For Islay, the big difference for us, as you know, is we make this sort of rich, smoky sort of type of whisky. And you were on the peat bogs this morning, so you see where the peat was used in olden days or many years ago, even before whisky making was there, it was used for fuel. Because although we use it in the whisky making, in those days when you cut peat, you know, and it was a hard life in Ireland 200 or 300 years ago, and they cut peat, and that was what heated your home, cooked your food, and then when you made whisky, you needed a heat source, so you burned peat, and you got this sort of rich, smoky flavour from it. At one time, most distilleries, I think, around Scotland would have used peat. In Islay, thankfully, we kept hold of it. And we do that. So on the southeast side here, with ourselves here at Ardbeg, for us the big difference for us is we use the smokiest malt of all the distilleries with the peating level. So we peat around about 50 to 55 parts per million, so it's really rich and smoky. But it's not all about peat smoke, because we talk with Ardbeg, we talk about balance as well. So I was trying to get that balance as well between the distillery and the peat smoke. So there's lots of things. As we go through the whiskies and we taste them later on, you'll see what we mean by doing that. So the distillery itself started, as I said, over 200 years ago. A family called the McDougals, who farmed at a place called Arran-on-Baist, which you'll probably see the little remains of this afternoon when you go in a walk. It's about 2 miles from here on the hill. And Arran-on-Baist means shelter or home of the beast, because it was a small farm. And you find that in those days people started, distilleries were farmers. They had the cereal or the grain, because Islay is known as the Queen of the Hebrides. It's one of the most fertile islands on the west coast, so they grew cereals and grain. They had the knowledge for making whisky, a basic knowledge which would have come a couple of hundred years ago from monks travelling on the west coast. So they started to make whisky in small amounts. And whisky making grew in Islay over the last sort of a couple of hundred years. So if you like, with Ardbeg, we've actually gone full circle when you look at it. We started making single malt as we know it, which was probably very different from what we're making now. And then when we go into the 20th century, a lot of Ardbeg was used in the blending market. And in the last, since Glenmorangie took over in 1997, we've mainly been concentrating now in single malt. So if you like, we've gone a really full circle to what we do. Everything we make at Ardbeg nowadays goes for ourselves. So we only fill whisky for Ardbeg for single malt. So all the casks that you see here for all the different whiskies that our profile, our portfolio, it's simply all for ourselves nowadays. So the distillery, again, up until about in the late 1970s, we used to do all our own malting here on the site as well. You see the pagodas. You were in the Old Kill Cafe this morning. The Old Kill, because that was called a kill. So we see the pagoda chimneys here, the one on the west side as well. So they're, although we call them pagodas, they're what we call Doig ventilators. They were invented by a guy called Charles Tree Doig in the 1890s, and it's really designed for smoking the malt. And up until the 1970s, we used to do all our own malting here on site. So there's a little pier or harbour about 400 metres in this direction here. Everything would have come in to there, transported into the distillery, and then converted it in here. When the late 1970s came along, there was a big sort of dip in the whisky market. A lot of distilleries closed. I mean, Ardbeg closed in 1981 for eight and a half years. So it was a change in the market. Most of Ardbeg at that time was going for single malt. There's a story from one of the old managers who was managing here in 1964 when he came here, and in that year they said they used 1 cask a year for single malt. All the rest was going for blending, and that was sold to the local hotels and some of the directors of the company at that time. So Ardbeg was a reputation as a good quality whisky. We've got lots of records going back with Ardbeg to the 1800s, even in Manhattan in New York. One of the first records is where Ardbeg was sold there in 1840s as 1, 2 and 3 star. So whatever that was, in those days it wasn't aged for as long as it is now. And other records. So it was being exported across the world for a long time. As I said, nowadays we're basically concentrating on the single malt. We've we're filling, as you see in the process today. We'll tell you a little bit of that as we come through the end of it. At the end of the tour, we can see we're filling into cask today. I'll show you the process as we go around. You'll be able to taste and smell everything as we go around. The water, as we're saying at the moment, for using in the process, comes from Loch Ugadale, which is about 3 or 4 miles away in the hill. And you can see we've got the Atlantic rains today, which is good for us. It's been a really good dry summer, but if you can imagine that coming off the Atlantic this direction here, southwesterly, comes in and it percolates, rains onto the hills, drains and percolates through the peat. And Ugadale means dark place or dark mysterious place, so we have this sort of dark tinge to our water. It has this peaty colour to it. You thought you were drinking tea or coffee in there. You just flavour the water here at Ardbeg, for it. So as this, it plays a bit of havoc in the distillery at times with filters and everything, but it's part of the process that we have to have. So we simply run it from Loch Ugadale into Loch Earnan or Arringham Base, which is our second loch. Then it runs through open track down into the distillery, and we simply boil the water to kill any bacteria in the water, filter out any rough debris or grasses that come down. So, and then we raise the temperature to about 90 degrees centigrade. Then we use it in the process. So the water just as it comes down. We don't treat it with chemicals or anything like that at all. The malt we use comes from the maltings in Port Ellen. You would have probably passed that this morning on your way in. So it makes malt for a lot of the distilleries on the island. Not every one. It was built in the early 1970s. And at that time it supplied all the distilleries on Islay and Jura at that time. So they had an agreement, all the distilleries had an agreement to take their malt so that place could be kept going and keep viable. I mean, it has to work 24 hours a day, about 50 weeks of the year. So we take the malt from there. We have an annual contract with them that states what we're looking for. The phenolics been most important part for us, for our phenolics and for the character in the whisky. So they supply that on a weekly basis. Come into the plant. We have a regular plan with them that they supply us right through the year on that, and that rolls on year from there. So that's important for us. The point of difference for us, that heavily peated malt. When we go into the still house, we'll talk about, we have a little purifier in our stills, which is quite unique to Ardbeg, which adds a lot of the character and the complexity into Ardbeg as well. And then when we're looking about the cask here, you'll see we've got sort of different types of cask here in the yard as well. So I can show you and tell you how we put the whiskies together for 10-year-old, Anno, Ugadale, Corrie Reckon. So with all the different types of cask here. So we're quite lucky within the business. Was when Ardbeg was bought by Glenmorangie in '97, they're sort of renowned in the business for their wood management and what they do with innovation with wood. So we do fill very good casks on it. So we've got good quality. We're filling some first fill barrels this morning. So making a good quality whisky, put it in a good container. That's what we do. So in a few years' time, when you come to drink it, we hope it's going to be the best it can be. So with the wood, the purifier and the malt as well. So there's these things that put it all together to put the character together for Ardbeg. You can see we're looking here, we're on the south coast. That's a Mull of Kintyre that you see down here on the west coast of Scotland. So, and then just off to the right, behind the building over here, we see the coast of Ireland from there. So we're looking right south here. So, and then out here you see the island. So it's a beautiful place along here where we make it, So it's I think with when you taste Ardbeg, you sort of get to taste it. We're making whisky between the sea and the land, so we've got a combination of both things coming into it as well. So. So we'll head off around the plant and we'll let you see and smell it and see as we go around. So.
Do you care where the barley comes from, or is it not?
We use Scottish barley. Mainly comes through from the maltings. They supply mainly from the north, east and the south, east of Scotland. So it gets shipped into the island here, and then it's processed and sent up to us. Yeah.
And how much water do you use a day?
Now we'd use a lot. Most of the water we use is used in cooling. That comes from the 2 lochs, so we have lots of water in the lochs. We've got 2 very large lochs. So in the process for making the whisky, we probably use about 75,000 litres a day, but for cooling we're probably using around about 1 million litres a day. So most of it's used in cooling, taken out, recooled down and then put back in. So.
What percentage of your whisky ages here on site?
Good percentage of it. A lot of it here. We have some on the mainland, so we'd probably 40 to 50% of it will probably be here. But we're looking at warehouses at the moment as well. We're looking to build warehouses here at the moment because we need to. We want to get all the whisky made here at Ardbeg matured on the island. So that's the plan. So as part of the expansion we've got going on as well, we've got a lot of work going on, as you'll see as we go around. We're looking to commission a new part of the plant next week, and then we start on a new still house, and we're looking at filling stores and warehousing as all part of the whole thing. So that's going to happen in the next couple of years as well. So there's a lot happening. with us. So